Nice moves, Dave.
What's that?
Nice moves, Dave. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Unnamed Hangout. This is episode number 5. It is Wednesday night, July 16th, 2014. My name is John. I am your host this evening. And joining me, I've got my two best buddies, Dave. Say hi to everybody, Dave.
Hey, from Arizona, Phoenix, in the house.
All right. Way to go, Dave. And from parts unknown, from his secret cave somewhere, we won't disclose the information. Dark nerd, streak in the quad.
Yeah. Hey, staying up late on the East Coast.
Yes. Shout-outs to everybody on the East Coast because they are burning the midnight oil because we've got some time differences. We're coming to you from 2 time zones and 3 different hidden locations. So before we get into our serious stuff this evening, let's start out with a quote and see how good everybody's doing tonight. As God is my witness, I'll never go hungry again.
Oh, it's a comedy, isn't it? I can't remember what it is.
One of our live listening audience thinks she already knows it, but I guess it could be considered a comedy. I wouldn't. As God is my witness, I'll never go hungry again. It's an old movie. It's a really old movie.
That narrows it down for me.
Is it really long?
I guess it's a really long movie. Yeah. Okay. The judges say yes. It was a really long movie. It was. I'll give you more hints. It was set during a war.
Gone with the Wind.
Did you cheat?
No.
What do you think, Dave?
I concur.
Well, once you said it was about the war, then I knew it was. I knew it was Gone with the Wind.
Yes, it was. It was Gone with the Wind. What? 1939, I think.
Really? What is that? They had color back then? No, that wasn't a color film, was it?
No, I think they colorized it probably. But yeah, I mean, and you know what? I'm ashamed to admit that I've never seen Gone with the Wind.
It's a comedy.
It's
about a racist Southern family that loses their household. I mean, I think that's hilarious.
Wow. I see we're setting it to boy. You know, our topic this evening is going to be so appropriate for what we're for the things we're saying. We've kind of come up with the plan that we're going to go light one week and maybe heavy the next week on topics. And in honor of the 4th of July, a suggestion was made that maybe we should talk about our country and the Constitution and things like that. And so we kind of came up with the idea that we would talk about the Bill of Rights and the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. And so tonight we are going to speak about the First Amendment to the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So that's the actual wording of the very First Amendment of the Constitution, which was adopted on December 15th in 1791 as one of the original 10 amendments of the Constitution, as we lovingly refer to as the Bill of Rights. Right. I thought that this is kind of an interesting one for the first one because it's got a lot of multiple pieces in, and I did a little bit of research and found out some things that are kind of interesting. But I don't know, thoughts, gentlemen?
I think it's funny when you talk about the First Amendment because people think that this amendment is actually like 3 different amendments. Like, oh wait, we have a right to speech and we have the right to assembly, we have a right to a petition, we have a right to religion. Those are all the same thing. I mean, I know a lot of people think, oh yeah, well, I think the third one's right to assembly. No, it's still part of the First Amendment. It's just it's kind of funny to see what everybody thinks is the most important amendments and how it's put in order, and they're actually not put in importance order. It just happens to be that the first one, I think the first one is extremely important to us as a society, but
I think it's probably the most important of those 10, and that's probably why it's the most complicated one and has so many pieces to it. I mean, it basically gives us some very, very basic and fundamental freedoms.
Dave's very quiet on this. He's not exercising his right.
Dave has exercised his right.
Yeah. Well, your Fifth Amendment is to keep quiet to not incriminate yourself. So you say the discussing may incriminate you?
What's kind of interesting is, I'm sure we'll get into this, is you start to break this down and look and see how much this amendment has changed, or how it's been the interpretation of what it originally was written as, and all the different things, and how it has progressed, and the not the changes to it, but I guess the interpretations of it. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. Establishment of religion. What do you think? What do you think that means?
It means that the government will not tell you what you are supposed to be believing in. The government shall not establish any religion as the religion of the country, and the people are free to do whatever they want, or free to believe in or not believe in whatever they want.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. What's kind of interesting is that I think a lot of people think that the freedom of religion, the establishment of religion, I think our original founders, what I think they really wanted was not necessarily, and I think this gets misinterpreted, where it says, well, we can't have religion in our government. There's talk about taking God out of the Pledge of Allegiance and all kinds of other things. And I think my opinion anyway, is that what really was meant was not necessarily to keep religion out of government, but to keep government out of religion. And I think those are two completely different things.
Yeah, well, it's funny, and you talk about the Constitution, or not? I'm sorry, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the addition of or the words of "under God." Before 1948, "under God" wasn't in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance the "under God" was added in 1948 to kind of bring to kind of show that we are kind of a country of God, I guess. Our forefathers were Christians, but there were a lot of representatives that were basically atheists. And Benjamin Franklin is probably one of the biggest, well-known ones of being. I don't know if he was an atheist, more of just a really true believer in the fact that that we should be able to believe in whatever we want, including not believing in anything at all.
Well, yeah, and this country was founded on people coming over here because their religious beliefs were being persecuted. I was not aware of that. What you said about 1948.
Yeah, actually, it was that was the first time that it was they had a meeting. Really, it was actually on Abraham Lincoln's birthday to discuss adding the "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance. So I mean, it really isn't. It's only been 60 years that we've had "under God" in our Pledge of Allegiance. Before that, it was without "under God." I don't know. I'm more of an atheist than a believer, and I sometimes believe that we shouldn't have that in there because it makes a connotation that we are of belief that this country is and the government is of belief of God, and maybe they are, but maybe that's not what we should have in our government.
Because it was really about the separation of the two, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was talking to a friend of mine that was, extremely religious person, and saying, we should get God back into government, and we should start putting that back into our beliefs and things like that. And I said, well, God never was in the government. We've put them there over time, but he wasn't part of government. Government, the way that our forefathers actually set up government, was brilliant. It was non-secular. It was a government that believed that everybody has the right to believe. It doesn't matter what religion you are. And I think I think being a true American is not forcing religion on somebody. Being a true American is letting somebody believe in whatever they want, and not forcing the issue.
And not persecuting people for what they believe in.
No,
allow you to believe.
We left England, our forefathers left England and Europe because we were being persecuted, because we couldn't believe in what we wanted to believe in. And, you look at things like the Catholic Empire in Europe and how they swept through with things like the Inquisition and stuff like that, just forcing people into believing stuff. You're not really forcing them to believe it. You're just telling them if they don't say they believe it, then you're going to kill them. They still not going to, people, if you don't believe it, you're not going to believe it. So I really, truly believe, and we're not the only government in the world that has these type of, I hate to say that we don't have these freedoms. The government doesn't give us the freedoms. And that's the beautiful wordsmithing of our Constitution. They're not giving us anything. They're saying they're not going to infringe on our rights. We already have the rights, and they're not going to take them away. They're not going to infringe on them.
So this freedom of religion does not give you the right to do anything you want in the name of religion, does it?
No, I think it has a lot to do with living in a peaceful society. It's one thing to have your beliefs and to practice your religion. It's another thing when your religion, your beliefs infringe or affect other people. I think that's a big part of that thought process.
Yeah, I think that within reason, as long as you're not doing things like human sacrifices or things like that, that you can pretty much do whatever you want. The only reason why things like human sacrifice are not something that they allow, even in the name of religion, is because we have other stricter laws against, killing people.
It's interesting that you brought up human sacrifice, because that's one of the things back in 1878. The Supreme Court ruled that freedom of religion means that you have the freedom to hold an opinion or a belief, but not necessarily to take action on that belief that would violate social duties or be subversive to good order. Laws can be made to regulate some practices, including one specifically mentioned was human sacrifice. That that to rule otherwise, the brief said, would be to make the professional doctrines of religious beliefs superior to the law of the land, and in effect permit every citizen to become a law unto himself. The freedom to believe is absolute, but the freedom to act on that belief is not as absolute.
If you take those same principles, and we're still going off of the First Amendment type stuff. We don't have a way of peering into people's minds to really know what they think. Not yet. I don't know. Maybe the government does. I have no idea. But
that's why I wear that helmet with the tinfoil on it.
Mine's like a pyramid, but but it's more of there's a lot of things in the law that state that you can believe in whatever you want, you can think however you want, as long as you don't act upon it. And that
you can act upon it if it's in the confines of the law.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly, and we say that kind of stuff, but let's kind of throw this out, and I'm not going to condone any of this action. I'm just throwing it out there. But what if someone had pedophilic thoughts? Is that legal? Not really. It's still illegal. I mean,
Well, the thoughts aren't illegal. It's acting upon them that's illegal.
if I wrote it down in a book and started describing about the things that, hey, I like this and I want to do this, I could get into some serious trouble for writing it down.
That's you're probably bridging something there where once you put it to pen and paper and you start putting something out there, that might be looked at differently. I don't know. That's interesting concept right there. I mean, you could go on about that, whether it's religion or government and that kind of thing. I mean,
if I wrote a book on how to kill people and slice them up and chop them up and then serve them for dinner,
wow,
is that illegal?
No, that would be probably a blockbuster Academy Award-winning Hollywood movie.
There's already books out there on that. That's what I'm saying, is that just because I write it down doesn't mean that I'm guilty of doing it. And that's the same thing. But for some reason, on certain subject matters, we find them a lot harsher. I mean, it is a lot harsher punishment on just doing things, or thinking a certain way. And I mean, not that, I'm like I say, I'm not condoning any action here. It's more of kind of a devil.
A food for thought. Yeah, it is interesting. I think that has a lot to do with the society we believe in, and we have a certain set values, I think, with our society, and I think that's probably where you run into some of the issues where you're going to arise some, well, probably more than suspicion, and probably bring a lot of attention to yourself as well.
Sure.
Well, you kind of segued into something by saying if you wrote it down and if you had those thoughts, are they illegal? And I'm obviously not a Supreme Court justice. I would say that probably having those thoughts is not illegal. If everyone went to jail for every thought they'd have, everyone would probably be in jail. You said if you write it down in a book, does that make it illegal? I don't. I heard your answer, but I didn't know if it was your opinion or if it was something that you were backing up. But so at some point, does that not? We're rolling into the second piece of the First Amendment. What about your freedom of speech? What is your freedom of speech? What does freedom of speech mean? What do you think? What's your opinion?
Well, I mean, for me, it means that we can say whatever we want as long as it doesn't cause harm or infringe on somebody else's rights. So this is only in a public area too, or in your private house. If you're in a government building, you don't have, or in a corporate building or school, library or something like that, you don't have the same freedom of speech. And this is where people really kind of get the law kind of messed up, is when you're in a building that isn't a public building and it isn't your home, you don't have the right to freedom of speech.
Well, it's governed by different laws.
Yeah, because kids will say stuff like, "Well, they're at school and they're like, well, it's just free speech." You don't have free speech at school. This is a school. This is an establishment. It has totally different bylaws. Yeah, when you leave school, you should have it could be if the kids don't believe in something and they want to petition something, go off school property and petition it, or hold signs and stuff like that. And I know there are cases where kids have done stuff off campus, have done stuff out of school and stuff like that, and still got in trouble at school for it, which I find extremely. I mean, if that ever happened to one of my kids, that they were exercising their rights, because to me, I mean, it would if my kids believed in something so much that they would go out and stand out and actually, do the research and petition against something, or have, that's a sense of pride to me that my kids would do something like that. Now I don't think they would, because I think they're lazy. But other than that, I think
even if it conflicted hard with your values and your beliefs.
Yeah, I wouldn't care. To me, because I believe it, and this is how I really truly believe in this First Amendment, is just because I believe it doesn't mean they believe it. I mean, there's a lot of things I believe in that I know our parents do not believe in.
What's kind of interesting is when I did some looking into freedom of speech, it kind of got broken down into separate categories, such as freedom of speech as it relates to speech that's critical of the government, political speech. Political speech actually got broken down into campaign finance, flag desecration, falsifying military records, commercial speech, obscenity, and like you mentioned before, school speech. Actually, in 1969, the Supreme Court extended free speech rights to students in school. The case involved several students who were punished for wearing black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. The court ruled that the school could not restrict symbolic speech that did not materially or substantially interrupt school activities. Justice Fortas wrote, First Amendment rights applied in the light of special characteristics of the school environment are available to teachers and students. It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. Schools may not be enclaves of totalitarianism. School officials do not possess absolute authority over their students. Students are possessed of fundamental rights which the states must respect, just as they themselves must respect their obligations to the state.
How does this play? I mean, okay, I understand that, but I mean, schools and institutions still have their own rules and laws. I mean, just like dress codes, for example. I mean,
yeah, that was the first thing that popped in my mind is that a lot of these schools have dress codes, and if you violate the dress code, then that's violating the bylaws of the school. And
so,
I'm guessing that nobody has pressed the dress code as a freedom of speech, or if they have, and this is constantly, especially when you talk about school and the kind of turbulent political environment we're in today, a lot of people recently have tried to use freedom of speech to allow them to do a lot of things. I don't know if anybody's ever pushed the school dress code and said, well, I should be able to do this because it's freedom of speech. Obviously, in 1969, the case came up about the students who were punished for wearing black armbands protesting the Vietnam War, and the courts came across and said no, that is a freedom of speech and they have that right. I think in any of these things, it's one of the reasons why we have courts and have judges to interpret these laws and decide where they apply to certain things. But there was a very controversial case recently about, and I was trying to find more information but could not, where the flag issue. About flying, foreign flags. It's very prevalent in Arizona because of SB 1070 and stuff like that, where people are trying to protect their rights to fly a flag of a foreign country and saying, well, that's freedom of speech. And I think it's actually been held up in a couple cases where it was considered to be a freedom of speech issue.
So, are you saying that there are people that say you can't fly a flag, a particular country flag?
No. This was specific to a school. The specific story is that I know it's happened in Arizona. The case I saw recently was in Texas, where some students had taken the Mexican flag and run it up the flagpole above the U.S. flag. And some other students took the flag down, and the students who took the flag down got punished because they were told that they were interfering with the freedom of speech, basically the people who put the flag up there. And we've had controversy like that in Arizona with people protesting SB 1070 and doing it in that manner. And I believe in Arizona it's been held up that they were allowed to do that because they were expressing their freedom of speech.
I think that's the school caving in and trying to be very liberal about the whole thing. I mean, to me, it's a vandalism thing. If you do anything to the flagpole that you're not allowed to do, then it's vandalism. Whether it's flying somebody else's flag or whatever, I get the protest, which obviously they can set up outside of school property and do whatever they want. But I think that the courts are wrong in letting, or even the school is wrong by saying that this is them expressing what. So let's say I just go out there and I put the Jolly Roger up there. Is that going to be freedom of my speech? I mean, you know what? When are we going to say that these are the okay flags to fly above the American flag, but these other flags are not okay? You know, I think that it's just wrong. But you know, that's my opinion on it. I mean, I think I like people who take pride in their country, no matter where they're coming from, and I think that I take a lot of pride in being from the United States, and I'm an extremely patriotic person, but I do think that if you're from another country, and you feel like you want to express yourself, do it. But when you do something like that, you're really kind of it's more of a vandalism thing than it is a
vandalism, disrespect. I don't know. That is really an interesting thought. I mean,
well, the commentator, the information that I saw, the news report that I saw, one of the comments they made they thought was kind of interesting was that basically this freedom of speech right allowed someone to fly the foreign flag above ours and was protected to do that, yet that these same rights does not protect our own flag from being burnt, because our own flag and that obviously that was a very big deal for a long time, was about flag desecration, that was protected under freedom of speech, and it wasn't actually until 2006 when they tried to pass the flag desecration amendment.
Well, here's my opinion on the flag desecration. I mean, like I said, I'm extremely patriotic. I serve my country. I would never ever do that to myself. But if you went out and bought a flag, you can do whatever you want to it. It's yours. Why should we tell you what you can do, what you can and can't do? I think it's tyrannical to say that you can't burn the flag. I mean, who are we to tell them they can't burn a flag?
Tyrannical. Well, that's a good word. And you know what? I guess obviously Congress has agreed with you, because I don't. The information I have says as of 2006, which is pretty old, that flag desecration amendment has still failed to pass. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why we're even wasting our money on doing something like that. It is protected. I mean, it's freedom of speech. We can't tell people that living in this country. I mean, this is one of the rights that we're protected on. I mean, we can't tell them how to think. If they think that burning the flag's okay, let them burn the flag. I
wonder what would happen to me if I burned a foreign country's flag.
Well, I mean, you should be protected on. If you want to burn a flag of Bolivia, go ahead. Whatever.
I'd celebrate you.
Yeah. Yeah, you may get your ass kicked, but I mean,
right. Those are some of the other things you got to deal with, and that's probably the reality of it too. I mean, just like you probably want to go down to Mexico and do something stupid like that, in my opinion, because whether it's right or wrong, somebody's probably going to step up and step in and take a piece of you, and that's probably the same thing you're going to face here. I don't know. You kind of get off on a whole different thing there, and why would somebody do this? Well, that's just their freedom of speech, so on and so forth. But there's probably a lot more behind something of that manner. If it's truly a belief, if you're doing it as a public display, I don't know. There's a lot of things going on right there.
I was looking, and freedom of speech is probably one of the most talked about of the pieces of the First Amendment that you hear the most about. What's interesting is I found out that up until the start of the 20th century, the Supreme Court had actually declined to rule on the constitutionality of any federal law regarding free speech, and it wasn't really until the time of World War I when the freedom of speech issue became so important because obviously we were in a war, espionage, political activism. There was a lot of cases where I think I think actually the courts kind of came down hard on people about what they could and could not say because of the conflicts we were in, and actually in 1940 Congress enacted the Smith Act, making it illegal to advocate the propriety of overthrowing or destroying the government of the United States by force or by violence. It wasn't until the Vietnam War when things started to kind of loosen up again, and public criticism changed things, and in 1968 the court kind of turned around and said that burning draft cards and things like that were protected under the freedom of speech. So obviously all of these amendments kind of the political current kind of determines how things are the ebb and flow of this.
I think one of the things that I think a lot of people need to remember, and like I said, I was in the Navy for 5 years and serving my country and things like that. That I know a lot of service members have the same feeling, is that you come back and there are people that are against the war and they start saying stuff, or you have people that are against the military, and they get to say anything they want, and people start asking, doesn't that just make you mad? You're over there serving your country, doing putting your life on the line, and these people over here, saying all this stuff and protesting the war and all that kind of stuff, and that is why we do it. That's why you serve, is so that people can say whatever they want.
What about obscenity?
What about it?
There's no law against obscenity.
I'm all for it.
I know you are. I mean, you practice that right every day.
If there were laws against obscenities, then we wouldn't be able to go watch movies. If there were laws against obscenities, you couldn't go to concerts. You couldn't do things like that, because people say that kind of stuff all the time. Obscenity, it's obscene to some people. Maybe it's not. Maybe people use obscenities and it's not obscene to them. You know what I mean?
Where they're words, we make them obscene. That's an interesting one. And I am not as versed on this. I mean, how does that play in there? I'd like to understand that a little bit better.
I think initially, the obscenity was not covered under freedom of speech. The federal government and the states have long been permitted to limit obscenity and/or pornography. Now, I think things have changed. Are they're starting to? But I mean, you've probably heard the statement. I don't know who said it. Somebody famous said it. Freedom of speech does not give you the right to run into a crowded movie house and yell fire. There are some obscenity laws that I guess take precedence over freedom of speech just being a blanket that gives you the right to say anything they want. But I think those laws are starting to change a little bit. The definition of obscenity and pornography has changed. A statement was made: First Amendment freedoms are most in danger when the government seeks to control thought or justify its laws for that impermissible end. The right to think is the beginning of freedom, and speech must be protected from the government because speech is the beginning of thought. But we do have obscenity laws that kind of keep you from doing just absolutely anything you want.
So if you stood on a public street corner and screamed obscenities like a stark raving idiot or something like that, there's laws that would keep you from carrying on. Would legally they could At what point? I mean, is there a limit to what you can say or how you can say it?
I don't think there are laws against what you can say as far as obscenities go. I think there are laws as far as being like, streaking the quad. There's laws against that. There's laws against running around naked. I mean, that's some people consider that obscene.
I've
It depends on the person whether I would consider it obscene, but
I've seen in public places people being shut down for foul language. I mean, in public places, I mean, lots of times in games and other stuff, they'll kick you out, and they have the right to do that. That's they have their own rules and what have you. But
you see that.
I've seen people. I've actually seen in Vegas they came and shut somebody up because he was just, and I don't know exactly what was said to that. Maybe it was a disturbing the peace issue or something like that. I don't know exactly
where
how
was
they did. I've seen it. I've seen it happen in Vegas out on the Strip.
Really? I've never seen.
Yeah, I don't think you can just. I don't think you could just stand on the street corner and yell f-bombs and say that's freedom of speech.
Well, I don't understand why somebody would consider yelling out obscenities
But I don't understand why somebody would burn on the flag. So I mean,
no, but here's my point. In Vegas, they're handing out porno cards on every street corner to anybody who walks by, including children, and yet they're going to get some guy for yelling out the curse words.
Well, I understand kind of where you're coming from there, but it's going to be. I think, in my personal opinion, it would probably be more of a disturbing the peace thing because you're standing out, handing something out. I get it, whether it's right, wrong, you believe it or not. If you're standing there just screaming obscenities and stuff like that, you could probably cause a situation where, first of all, upsetting people, causing fights or disturbances or that kind of thing. I could see where that could instigate more of an issue.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think it's the obscenities. I think it's the more of being a disturbance more than anything.
And maybe that's how they get around that. I don't know how exactly the law is written, or do you have something on that specifically, John, that would prohibit you from?
No, I don't. I just I was just throwing it out there. I think one of the things that we uncover when we're discussing these things is that, and I think that I think the people that wrote these laws knew this was going to happen, and it's built into the system for it to happen. But these laws are not. They're not carved in stone. They're open to interpretation. I think that interpretation, as I said earlier, changes with, what's going on, what public sentiment is at the time within reason. Again, back in World War I, freedom of speech was very very regulated because of what was going on during the war. Even in World War II, and then all of a sudden in Vietnam, you saw a drastic change in how things were interpreted. I think in any of these things, I think obscenity laws. I think if you looked back at what was obscene in 1900 and probably what was obscene in 1900 was probably what you'd see on Nickelodeon today. Kind of scary because probably what we consider to be obscene today will probably be on network television 20 years from now. But I know a lot of people have referred to our laws as living, breathing things that have life to them, and I mean that's why we have a Supreme Court to interpret these things, and hopefully they're doing their job right, and kind of taking the will of the people into consideration when they're making some of these decisions, I guess.
Yeah, interesting thoughts. I know without going in a total different direction, but you think of just words and conversation and obscenities and so on and so forth, and you think of the way you even communicate with your friends and people and probably children today is a lot different than we did years ago. The way we interpret things as whether they're obscene or not is probably very open interpretation too, and how things are handled. And you talk about being living, breathing things. It's an interesting concept and thought, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, we're always evolving. Everything is our speech, the way we think, the way we do things. And that's probably why there's amendments and changes to laws that are constant. I mean, there's probably new laws written every day and every year, little laws, big laws, and so on and so forth, for these very reasons.
So the next piece, there's still two things left in the First Amendment that we haven't spoken about. One of them is freedom of the press. Where would we be without that?
Yeah, the press. Yes. You know, it used to be that the press wasn't opinionated. They would actually report the facts. Now it's all about opinions. You can't turn a news program without getting the opinion of the newscaster or the network that they're on. It's just it's even said it's in the newspapers. I mean, you have a newspaper when you pick it up. You know, you pick up the New York Times. That's a liberal paper, right? You know, USA Today. Oh, that's pretty liberal. You know, you're looking. You're trying to find, or the Washington Times. Oh, that's your conservative paper, right? So who has the right story? I mean,
no, it's not. I don't know if it's right or wrong, and they do have freedom of speech there. I think probably the bigger issue you face today is defamation of character. I mean, that's a big one. I mean, you got to be careful. You can go write anything you want, but what happens when you damage somebody's reputation or that kind of thing? I mean, there's laws in place. I mean, you can be sued and all kinds of stuff now. So is that more the issue that we're talking about? I mean, you have the right to your opinion.
Defamation of character is actually a sub-part of freedom of speech as opposed to freedom of the press. You know, and I think Jason, I think you're right. You know, the press. I heard a family member one time say to me recently that, and I think everyone would agree with this, the news is no longer the news. The news is entertainment, and you can't turn on the news without there being a certain entertainment factor to it. I could turn on Fox and I could turn on CNN and they could both report the same story and it would be completely the opposite. Sometimes I don't know what kind of faith people have in our news media, our press, anything anymore. For me personally, I don't have a lot of faith in it anymore. I think it's probably not what it used to be 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I don't think people trust it anymore the way they used to. But I can't imagine what it would be like, though, if we didn't have those freedoms. I think you could probably look at other countries that control their press, that have a national press, you know, and the information that gets out to the public and how completely biased it is.
Yeah, I think you know, partially the problem with today's news is the fault of CNN. Before CNN was a 24-hour news network, people were reporting the news. They only had an hour to do the news, so they did the news in an hour. When CNN came along, it's the first 24-hour news network. They had to fill a lot of time. How do you fill a lot of time? You got to put some opinion in there. You got to make some controversy or do something because you got a lot of time to fill. Now, you know, every network, you know, Fox has a news network that's 24 hours and MSNBC 24 hours. I mean, they all got these they have lots of time on their hand to go out there and make stories their own now, you know, whereas before, you know, in the 80s, 70s and 80s, 60s, you were reporting the news because that was it. You got an hour to report the news. So you went out there and you reported the news. Now it is an entertainment thing. You've got 24 hours to fill, and it's entertainment.
Does anybody even watch the nightly news? I couldn't even tell you who's on the nightly news anymore.
I don't watch any news programs because, like, I've come to the realization they're all a bunch of liars.
Where do you get your information then?
Well, everybody puts their own spin on it.
Yeah, you have to go through multiple sources. So you know,
on the internet, because if it's on the internet, it's true.
Yeah. No, you just have to grab it from multiple sources. You know, I read a lot of news blogs. You know, it's hard to read some of these things. I mean, some of them are so opinion filled that it's just hard to read them. But
take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of. I mean, the big news items. You know, you can't. You get the gist of the news items, and that's the thing is, you know, I get enough of the news where I know what's going on, but I don't have to know about what their opinion is about what's going on, or what kind of spin they're going to put onto it, and how it's Obama's fault, or how it's the fact that the Republicans control the House, or whatever. I don't really care about all that stuff. That doesn't make sense to me. What I care about is, you know,
the meat and potatoes, but everybody becomes very cynical because you don't know what to believe anymore, you know, and that's you know, unless you're just part of the herd and following everybody else. I mean, if you think for yourself, that is tough, and I probably do the same thing. I mean, I watch the news because I want to know what's going on, but I feel the same way. It's very difficult. You're kind of picking and choosing and what have you, but you know that there's just so much fill and junk in there and opinion that it does really make it difficult. I mean, what do you do for the news, John?
You know what? I don't watch a lot of news. I used to watch the news very religiously, and I watched entertainment news, and I watched a news station that mirrored my beliefs. Sometimes I would. What's that?
You could say Fox. It's okay.
Yeah, right. I watched Fox News, but sometimes I turn on CNN just to see what the other side was saying, and after a while I just kind of laughed at it because, again, you'd see the same story reported by two different people with two completely different sets of facts. I've kind of gone into a news blackout probably the last year or so because it's just, you know, there is some truth to the statement that ignorance is bliss. So to answer Dave's question, I'm gonna throw this off to another direction. I listen to a lot of talk radio, and recently, probably over the last 5 years, there has been a lot of talk about talk radio and limiting talk radio, and you know, because I think it's a fair statement that predominantly talk radio is a conservative thing. You find I could make up numbers, but there's probably a lot more conservative talk radio shows out there as opposed to, for lack of a better term, liberal talk shows. And there have been a lot of people saying that we should silence talk radio a little bit because it gets people wound up, and it, you know, all the different things. So I'm kind of taking this off on a spin what you guys think, but I get a lot of information from talk radio.
I think that the press has an extremely big responsibility when informing their people. A lot of people will sit in front of things like MSNBC or Fox News and or CNN, and this is where they get that's the only source for their news. And they go by whatever they say on there, whatever charts are being thrown in their face. That's what they're going to believe in, and that's how they're gonna go out there and tell everybody about a specific problem or whatever is going on. They have a responsibility to report the news and report facts, and a lot of times they are not reporting facts. They're reporting opinions, and that's where I have the biggest problem with the press. Now, going back to the First Amendment and freedom of the press, yeah, I guess they could say whatever they want, but I think it's kind of dangerous for them to go out and report false information, or not so much false as spun information spun in a way that makes them sound or makes their point more valid than or I don't know. You could spin an article to make it sound like I could tell you about how they're killing kittens in China and make it sound like a good story if you put the right spin on it. You know, that's the thing is and I think a lot of these news corporations put the spin on it, and it really, I think, is detrimental to getting out the actual facts of and actually getting people to form their own opinions. That was the greatest part about news in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, is what they told you the facts and that was it, and then you went out and formed your own opinion. You could actually talk to somebody about this because you got your own opinion on the facts, instead of getting somebody else's opinion and going out and spitting those out like they're facts.
I think that's just the world we live in, though. They're protected to say what they want. This is exactly what's happened. It's been an ever-changing world. I mean, we talk, and I get exactly what you're saying, but this is just like anything else. When we're talking about religion or anything else, this is all the stuff that we fought for, right?
Well, freedom of the press is described as the Free Press Clause protects the right of individuals to express themselves through publication and dissemination of information, ideas, and opinions without interference, constraint, or prosecution by the government. This right was described in Case, et cetera, and is considered to be a fundamental personal right that's not confined to newspapers and periodicals. So,
and this is why they get away with it, and nobody says anything about it. Is because they're protected. They can come out there and tell you a story, make stuff up, and as fact, and they can get away with it. And I think it's dangerous. But yeah, I think, Dave, you're exactly right. This is why. This is what we fight for. This is the protections that we, as military members, we fight for that. You know, I mean, it's kind of it's a double-edged sword. You need it, because if you didn't have it, it would be a lot worse than it is now. But you know, people abuse that privilege. But again,
that's probably a very fair statement too. That while many of these laws have their flaws, and that's why we interpret them and rule on them, at the end of the day, every single one of these, without them, would be far worse off than what we have, even with the flaws that it has.
Yeah, we're all going to have our opinions, and that's what's always going to be the struggle with all of this. Is this is the very foundation of what we believe in and who we are as a country, and these are always going to be the struggles we have, because we're going to have opinions and stuff out there that we don't necessarily agree with or we don't like, but this is going to be the fight, and it's always going to be that balance, and that's the tough part of this whole thing.
There's one piece left of the First Amendment that we did not talk about, and that is the right to petition and assemble. The petition clause protects the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This includes the right to communicate with government officials, lobbying government officials, and petitioning the courts by filing lawsuits. This clause came to prominence in the 1930s, and then later on, the right to assemble was distinguished from the right to petition. The right of the people to peacefully assemble for the purpose of petitioning Congress for a redress of grievances or anything else connected with the powers or duties of the national government, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think we talk about that one very often, because maybe I don't know, maybe that's something we just take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I probably agree with you on that one. I don't know of anybody, or I haven't heard of any cases where people were denied the right to petition or assembly. Now, they may have been denied the right to petition on private property, but that's completely different. You know, you don't have rights over somebody else's private property. If it's a public road, or if it's a public anything, you should have the right to assemble and petition.
Well, and I think this one goes back to Revolutionary War times. I mean, that was one of the things that was one of the reasons why we broke away from England, was because we felt like we weren't represented, and we had no right to petition the monarchy. Basically, this is the way it is, and you're going to like it. And again, it's not what we talk about a lot, but it is a pretty critical piece of the First Amendment.
I was having flashbacks of my childhood.
Okay.
and dinner and opinions and stuff like that. No, we lived in a monarchy when we were young, so.
Well, every family's a monarchy.
It wasn't a monarchy.
Dictatorship.
Yeah.
Dictatorship. Yeah. It definitely was a dictatorship.
We've all had that talk with our children, haven't we? That this is not a free and open society in our house. This is a dictatorship, and
you'll like it.
Yeah, these rights don't apply to parenthood.
No, that's what I my kids all the time. It's you have those rights when you turn 18 and you leave.
Yeah, you have those rights. You have those rights when you form your own country and come up with your own. You can have a monarchy in your own country.
Yeah, form your own more perfect union.
This is the I'm just going. Go ahead, move on. I'm not even going to bring it up. Change my mind.
Wow. That was it.
Well, actually, we're kind of running over a little.
Yeah, I was going to say, once again, we did a really good job filling our time. I don't think we have. We're off the sports. We're off the sports thing for a little while now, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't. We should have done soccer picks, but
Well, didn't you get your WNBA picks in?
Yeah. All right.
You know what? It's not that long for football season starts, for real football starts, and I think we're going to have an awful lot of fun with that.
I don't know. I'm picking the Washington Mystics to actually come ahead in the WNBA. So if you could name any other team.
Wow.
If you can name the starting lineup in 10 seconds.
I don't know if I could say all their names in 10 seconds.
You ought to ask yourself why you know any of that.
Well, it's just the Mystics are here in town, so that's the only reason why I know anything about them.
Well, I'm sure pretty soon we'll have an awful lot to talk about in sports, probably both of a political nature and a more fun nature. But as we're wrapping it up, what I'm going to start calling the "why you say it" thing, I've got one for you. What does 3 sheets to the wind mean?
Oh man, I used to know this.
Well, and without the exact explanation, we're talking about overindulging, right?
We are. That's what it's kind of turned into. Yeah, 3 sheets to the wind, which means that you're intoxicated. But where did that come from? Why do we relate 3 sheets to the wind to being intoxicated?
Well, I know for a friend of mine, he actually needed 3 sheets to clean his mess up after a night of binge drinking. But
you're kind of. Do you have a book of like naval terminology? Is that where you're getting all this stuff from?
No, I do not. I just happened to pick this one. I don't know why I picked this one. I do. I'm not going to lie to you. I'd like to pretend like I'm just a genius and I know all this stuff. But yes, I do have a very interesting book, and there are just so many different things, and I just happened to pick this one. But you're right. We've kind of gone on the Navy thing. Sailors in danger of losing their lives created this phrase. Many old-time vessels perform best when their rigging was symmetrical, outfitted with 4 masts and 4 sets of sails. A craft was expected to use all of them under most circumstances. Sometimes, though, the 4th and final sets of canvas were not spread. A 4th master with only 3 masts in action was in big trouble when hit by a sudden gale. The rolling and pitching of a poorly rigged ship was much like the actions of a human who has downed too many drinks. A comparison was appropriate and inevitable as a result, and a thoroughly tanked human barely able to get underway is described as lacking an essential set of canvas sails. So it's got to do with the the pitching and not using that fourth set of sails to keep the ship
So to
proper.
use it in a sentence, Margot was 3 sheets to the wind by the time we made it to Doug's party, judging by our inability to keep her clothes on.
Wow. Okay.
That was
So
that was an actual.
No naval references next time. But I thought you'd like that. I thought the Navy thing would be easy for you.
It is once I think about it. I knew what it was, but I couldn't. I knew it had something to do with the boat rocking, but I didn't know the whole story behind it.
Yeah, and I thought I saw this book one day. I thought it was very interesting. Some of the things Dave and I have talked about this in private conversations of why we say some of the things we say, and I probably use those kind of acronyms more than anyone, and probably don't understand what most of them mean. So
we actually sat down, a handful of us, and went through a bunch of them, and a lot of them were very fascinating. I just want to give you a couple examples or words related to 3 sheets to the wind now that we have an understanding. But here it goes. We've got drunk, we've got wasted, hammered, inebriated, sloshed, tank, intoxicated, shit-faced, blitzed, smashed, plastered, tipsy, beer, laced, pissed, trash, wrecked, bomb, canned. And they got shit-faced down again. Maybe that's a good one.
My favorite is pissed.
I'm wondering. So I guess maybe I should look in my book and see if the explanation of why we call it shit face. That probably would. If I can find that one, maybe we'll do that.
Have you seen your face when you
Yeah, that would. I'd like to. Could I find that?
I'm sure you probably could, and if you do, you can save that for next week. So, gentlemen, parting comments. Dave's staring at his computer, so we'll go to the Dark Nerds Cave.
Parting comments. I don't really have any this week. I'm tired. I think we're we're running over. I should have prepared more for this week.
I was going to say I concur. It's a good topic, interesting. Didn't do my homework. Although I've got a good gist of it, I wish I'd have got a little more into detail and a little more ramped up for it. Enjoyed it. It was always interesting to hear the thoughts of everybody and opinions, and it was enlightening. So I appreciate that, and look forward to our next episode.
Well, I'm always grateful to spend this time with you guys, and looking forward to getting back on our regular schedule. I believe one of us is getting ready to take a little vacation, are we not?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think by this time next week we'll have a show I'll be on, but the week after it's gonna.
You're not going to broadcast from vacation?
I don't think that I have internet access in the middle of the ocean, but I'm taking a cruise, so I don't know. Actually, we're doing this every 2 weeks, right? That's what
we
are. Yeah, so.
Well,
2 weeks from now, I will be. Actually, I'll be on my way back, but I will be out in the middle. Well, not in the middle, but out in the Atlantic Ocean, probably close to Bermuda by this time.
Well, we'll be looking forward to hearing from you, hearing all about your vacation and all that. So, having said all that, great show. I was going to have to say goodnight for Dave, but it looks like Dave is back. So. As always, it's been great, guys. On behalf of myself and the rest of the group here, then have a wonderful evening and signing off.
All right.
Night.
Click.